Okay, so ready to dive into Shrinking Season 1.
Let's do it.
All the spoilers,
Yeah.
all the laughs,
Uh-huh.
all the tears,
For sure.
all the what did I just watch moments.
It's a good one.
If you haven't finished the season yet, you might want to hit pause and come back later.
Yeah.
Seriously, you don't want this ending spoiled.
No, you don't.
But for those of you who have seen it, buckle up because we're about to break down all the messy, hilarious, heartwarming moments of Season 1.
Yeah, it's a show that really stays with you, I think, even after the credits roll.
Totally.
A lot of shows try to tackle grief and loss, but Shrinking does it with this really unique blend of humor and heart that just hits differently.
Yeah, it's not afraid to get real, you know?
Yeah.
It shows the messy, the complicated side of grief and then throws in these hilarious characters in absurd situations, and somehow it all works together.
Yeah, it does.
But at the center of it all is Jimmy, our main character.
Right.
And he is a mess.
Uh-huh.
A therapist who's completely lost in his own grief after his wife's death.
Yeah, you see him spiraling, gnawing himself with alcohol, ignoring his daughter Alice, basically throwing all the therapy rule books out the window.
Totally.
It's fascinating to watch, but also kind of painful, especially in those early episodes.
Yeah, it's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Okay.
You know it's not going to end well,
Right.
but you can't look away.
Nope.
And then he starts using these, let's call them unconventional methods with his patients.
Yes.
Like straight up telling a woman to leave her abusive husband.
Yeah.
That's not exactly ethical therapy 101.
It's a huge ethical dilemma, right?
It's huge.
Because on one hand, you're thinking this guy's going to lose his license, he's going to get sued. But then
Okay.
some of his patients actually start making progress.
Yeah.
It raises this really interesting question, like, what are the limits of therapy?
Right.
When do the rules need to be broken?
Yeah. And the show doesn't shy away from the messiness of that question at all.
No, it doesn't.
We see the good, the bad, and the ugly of Jimmy's approach. We see him helping people, but we also see him crossing lines, putting his own needs before his patients, and making some really questionable decisions.
Yeah.
Like letting Sean, his patient, who's a veteran with PTSD, move into his house.
That was a major red flag.
Yeah.
And you see how that decision impacts his relationship with Alice, who's also grieving and trying to process her mom's death.
Right.
It's almost like Jimmy's trying to save everyone but himself,
Totally.
and he's just making things worse in the process.
Yeah. Poor Alice.
Yeah.
She's surrounded by adults who are trying to help, but they're all kind of mess in their own way.
Right.
Her overprotective neighbor, Liz Gaby, who's Jimmy's colleague and kind of acts like a surrogate aunt. They all have good intentions,
They do.
but they're also adding to the chaos.
Yeah, it's like this tangled web of relationships.
Totally.
Everyone trying to figure out how to grieve and how to live in this new reality without Jimmy's wife.
Right.
And then you have Paul,
Yes.
this legendary therapist played by Harrison Ford, who seems to be the only one with his head on straight.
Paul is such a great character.
I love him.
He's got this gruff wisdom,
Yeah.
this no-nonsense approach to life that's both intimidating and endearing.
Totally.
He becomes this mentor figure to Jimmy,
Yes.
trying to guide him back from the edge.
Right.
And he also forms a really unique bond with Alice,
He does.
becoming this unlikely source of support for her.
It's beautiful.
Their dynamic is so fascinating.
It is.
Paul's dealing with his own struggles. He's got Parkinson's disease, a strained relationship with his daughter, and a whole lot of emotional baggage he's carrying around.
Yeah.
But he sees something in both Jimmy and Alice.
He does.
Then he wants to help them, even if he doesn't always know how.
It's sweet.
He's got this great line about giving yourself 15 minutes to be sad.
Oh, yeah.
Like, set a timer. Let yourself feel those feelings fully, and then move on.
Such good advice.
It's a really practical, almost counterintuitive approach to dealing with difficult emotions.
It is.
It speaks to this larger theme of the show, which is finding a balance between acknowledging your pain and not letting it consume you.
Yeah. I think that's such an important message.
Yeah,
Each character is trying to find their own way to do that.
totally.
And it's not always pretty or straightforward.
Yeah.
Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they stumble, and sometimes they make decisions that leave you wondering if they've completely lost their minds.
Like Grace.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Grace?
Yeah.
Jimmy's patient who's in this terrible abusive marriage.
I remember Grace.
She's a great example of how the show plays with your expectations.
It does.
At first, she seems like this sweet, innocent victim. But as the season progresses,
Right.
you start to see a different side to her.
Uh-huh.
She's got this simmering rage, this frustration that she's been suppressing for years.
Yeah.
And Jimmy encourages her to leave her husband to stand up for herself.
Right.
But then in the season finale,
Yes.
she takes things to a whole new level.
That cliffhanger.
That cliffhanger ending.
Oh my God.
It's one of those moments where you just have to rewind and watch it again to make sure you actually saw what you thought you saw.
Totally.
Grace actually pushes her husband off a cliff.
I know.
And it leaves you with so many questions.
So many questions.
Did she kill him?
Right.
Will she get away with it?
Exactly.
And most importantly, will Jimmy be held responsible for pushing her to leave?
Oh, it's going to be good.
He did break a lot of rules this season.
He did.
And this could be the thing that finally brings him down.
Oh, yeah.
It's a brilliant ending.
It is.
And it perfectly sets up season 2.
Absolutely.
We're left wondering about the consequences of Jimmy's actions, about the fate of Grace, and about what's going to happen to all these characters who are still trying to find their way through the darkness.
Yeah. It's a lot to process.
It is. There's so many other storylines and characters we could talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Alice's evolving relationships with Liz and Gabby. Her brief infatuation with Sean.
Right.
Jimmy's growing feelings for Gabby. Yeah. It's a show that's packed with complex relationships and surprising twists and turns.
For sure. And it's all interwoven with these little details and Easter eggs that reward careful viewers.
Oh, totally.
Like that scene where Jimmy's playing piano at Gabby's divorce party.
Yeah.
Did you catch the song he was playing?
I don't think so. Is it something significant?
It was an instrumental version of Mystery of Love by Sufjan Stevens.
What?
The same song that was featured in the movie Call Me By Your Name.
Oh, interesting.
It's a subtle nod to the themes of love loss and the complexities of human connection that run throughout both the movie and the show.
Wow, I totally missed that.
It's a good one.
That's so cool. I love how the show rewards viewers who pay attention to those little details.
Me too.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about Jimmy's unorthodox methods, Alice's journey through grief,
Yeah.
Paul's wisdom and struggles,
Right.
and that crazy cliffhanger ending.
I know.
But we've only scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more.
There are so many more layers to this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many more things to unpack.
We haven't even touched on Paul's relationship with his daughter Gabby's divorce or Liz's evolving role as a surrogate mother figure to Alice.
And we definitely need to talk more about that cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still reeling from it.
Don't worry, we'll get to all of that in the next 2 parts of our recap.
Awesome.
We're going to dive deeper into the characters' backstories,
Okay.
explore the show's themes of forgiveness and redemption,
Okay.
and try to make sense of that shocking ending.
I can't wait.
And hopefully we'll uncover a few more Easter eggs along the way.
Yes, hopefully.
Just stay tuned.
All right, we'll be right back with part 2 after a quick break. Okay, so picking up where we left off, I think one of the most compelling aspects of Shrinking is how it delves into the complexities of human relationships.
Oh, yeah.
We've got Jimmy and Alice, obviously, but then you have this whole network of connections that ripple outward from them.
Totally. It's like a domino effect.
One relationship impacts another, and it creates this really intricate web of emotions and consequences.
Yeah.
And it's especially interesting to see how the show portrays the different types of love and support that exist between these characters. Like Liz, for example.
Right.
She's not Alice's biological mom.
Right.
But she steps into this maternal role, providing a sense of stability and guidance that Alice desperately needs.
Yeah, it's almost like she's trying to overcompensate for the lack of a mother figure in Alice's life.
Right.
And it creates this interesting dynamic between Liz and Jimmy where they're constantly butting heads over how to raise Alice.
Totally.
They both want what's best for her.
Yeah.
But they have very different approaches.
Very different approaches. And then you have Gabby, who's Jimmy's colleague,
Yeah.
but also becomes a confidant and a source of emotional support for Alice.
Yes.
She's kind of the cool aunt who gives you advice and lets you get away with things your parents wouldn't approve of.
Exactly.
But she also has her own boundaries, and she's not afraid to call Jimmy out on his BS.
Yeah. It's a really healthy dynamic, I think. They
Yeah.
have this mutual respect, but they also challenge each other to be better.
Sort of.
And it's not just about Alice.
Right.
We see those same dynamics playing out in the relationships between the adults, like Jimmy and Paul, for example.
Yeah.
They start off as colleagues,
Right.
but they develop this mentor-mentee relationship that's both professional and deeply personal.
Oh, for sure. Paul becomes this sort of father figure to Jimmy, offering guidance and wisdom that Jimmy desperately needs.
Right.
But it's not a one-way street.
No.
We see Paul learning from Jimmy, too, opening up to him in ways he never thought possible.
Exactly. And that vulnerability is really beautiful to watch, especially coming from Harrison Ford, who we usually see playing these tough, stoic characters.
I know.
It's a reminder that even the most seemingly put together people have their struggles, and that it's okay to ask for help to let people in.
Yeah.
And that's a recurring theme throughout the show. We see these characters breaking down, admitting their weaknesses, leaning on each other for support.
Yeah, and it's not always pretty or easy.
No, it's not.
There are fights, there are misunderstandings, there are betrayals.
Right.
But it's all part of the process of growing and healing.
Exactly. Like, remember that scene where Paul finally tells his daughter Meg about his Parkinson's diagnosis?
Oh, yeah, it was such a powerful moment.
So powerful.
He'd been pushing her away, trying to protect her from his pain.
Right.
But it only created more distance between them. Exactly. And when he finally breaks down and lets her in,
Yeah.
it's like this huge weight is lifted off both of their shoulders.
Beautiful.
It's a reminder that honesty and vulnerability are essential for building strong relationships.
Absolutely.
And that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let the people you love see your weaknesses.
It is.
But it's also the most rewarding.
So rewarding. And speaking of rewarding, let's talk about some of the smaller characters who really add depth and humor to the show.
Yes.
Like Brian, Jimmy's best friend.
Oh, Brian.
He's this lovable goofball who's always there for Jimmy,
Uh-huh.
even when Jimmy's being a complete jerk.
Yeah, he's the comic relief, but he also has these moments of surprising wisdom and insight.
He does.
And his relationship with Charlie is just adorable.
Oh, they're so cute.
They're this unlikely couple who somehow make it work. And their wedding in the season finale is one of the most heartwarming moments of the entire show.
It's a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places.
Yes.
And that sometimes the people who seem the most different from us are the ones who can teach us the most valuable lessons about life.
And then there's Liz's husband, Derek.
Oh, yeah, Derek.
He's recently retired, and he's trying to figure out what to do with his time.
Right.
He's kind of lost and a little bit clueless,
Uh-huh.
but he's also got this sweet, supportive side that makes him endearing.
Yeah, he's a great example of how the show subverts stereotypes.
It does.
He's not your typical grumpy old man.
Yeah.
He's actually quite sensitive and emotionally tuned in.
And he forms a really close bond with Alice.
Yeah, he becomes this sort of grandfather figure to her, someone she can talk to about anything.
Oh.
And it's really sweet to see how he embraces that role.
It's a reminder that family isn't always about blood ties.
Right.
It's about the people who love and support you no matter what.
Even the minor characters like Jimmy's patients
Yeah.
are so well developed and relatable.
Yeah.
They're not just plot devices.
Mhm.
They're real people with real problems. And we get invested in their stories.
I agree. Like Wally, the woman with OCD who's obsessed with cleaning.
Oh, yeah.
She's so funny and quirky, but we also see the pain and anxiety that she's dealing with.
Right.
And it's really satisfying to see her make progress with Jimmy's help.
And then there's the couple struggling with infertility.
Right.
Their story is heartbreaking, but it also highlights the emotional toll that such a challenge can take on a relationship.
Absolutely.
And it's a reminder that therapy isn't just for people with big problems.
Uh-huh.
It can be helpful for anyone who's going through a tough time.
Exactly. And the show does a great job of destigmatizing therapy.
It does.
It shows that it's okay to ask for help, to talk to someone about what you're going through,
Yeah.
and that it can actually be a really positive and transformative experience.
So we've talked a lot about the characters and their relationships,
We have.
but I think one of the most important things about Shrinking is its message of hope and resilience.
I agree.
These characters have been through so much loss, grief, trauma, betrayal,
Mm-hmm.
but they keep going.
They do.
They keep fighting for themselves and for each other.
It's inspiring.
It's a reminder that even when things feel impossible, there's always a way forward.
Yeah.
And that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty and joy to be found.
I love that.
Like that scene in the season finale where everyone's dancing at Brian and Charlie's wedding.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a joyous moment. And it gives you this sense that despite all the pain and heartache, these characters are going to be okay.
They are.
And that's a really powerful message to send, especially in a world that often feels overwhelming and chaotic.
It is.
Shrinking reminds us that it's okay to not have all the answers, to make mistakes, to fall apart sometimes.
Yeah.
But it also shows us that we're not alone,
Right.
that there are people who care about us, who will pick us up when we fall and who will help us find our way back to the light.
It's a beautiful message. As we wrap up our look at Shrinking, I keep thinking about how the show tackles this idea of forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about forgiving others, but also forgiving yourself.
Yeah, it's true. Every character is wrestling with some kind of guilt or regret.
Yeah.
Jimmy especially is haunted by his past mistakes as a husband and father. He's trying so hard to be better, to make amends, but he keeps tripping himself up.
And Alice, too, is carrying this weight of resentment and anger towards her dad.
Right.
She's trying to understand why he's acting the way he is, but it's hard for her to let go of that hurt.
Yeah.
It makes their scenes together so emotionally charged because you can feel that tension between them.
Yet the show doesn't shy away from those difficult conversations.
It doesn't.
You see them trying to communicate to bridge that gap, but it's a process.
Right.
It takes time, it takes honesty, and it takes a willingness to be vulnerable with each other. And then you have Paul, who's carrying around his own share of guilt over his strained relationship with his daughter, Meg.
Yeah, he spent so many years focused on his career, on being this renowned therapist, that he's neglected his personal life, and now he's trying to make up for lost time, but it's not easy. He's made mistakes, he's hurt people, and he's trying to figure out how to forgive himself and move forward.
And that's what makes the show so relatable,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We've all made mistakes. We've all hurt people intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
And learning to forgive ourselves and others is a lifelong journey.
It is. It's not about forgetting the past or condoning bad behavior. It's about acknowledging the pain, learning from it, and finding a way to move forward with compassion and understanding. And Shrinking shows us that it's possible even when it feels impossible, even when the wounds are deep and the scars are still visible. There's always hope for healing and reconciliation.
And speaking of healing, I think it's important to acknowledge that the show also deals with some really sensitive topics, like mental illness and trauma.
Right.
But it does so in a way that feels authentic and respectful.
Absolutely. It
Okay.
doesn't shy away from the realities of these conditions, but it also avoids sensationalizing or exploiting them.
Yeah.
We see the characters struggling, we see them seeking help, we see them making progress, and we see them having setbacks. It's a very nuanced and humanizing portrayal.
Totally. It normalizes the idea of seeking help, of talking to someone about what you're going through. And it shows that there's no shame in struggling with mental health issues. It's something that affects so many people. And it's important to talk about it openly and honestly.
And I think that's one of the show's greatest strengths.
Yeah.
It tackles these difficult, sometimes taboo subjects with compassion, humor, and a deep understanding of the human experience.
Okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about that ending again. It's been a few weeks since we finished the season, but I'm still thinking about it. Grace pushing her husband off a cliff. It was so unexpected, so shocking, and it left me with so many questions.
It's a brilliant cliffhanger because it forces us to confront the consequences of Jimmy's actions.
Right.
He's been pushing Grace to leave her husband to stand up for herself, and now she's taken things to the extreme.
Yeah.
Did he go too far?
I don't know.
Did his unconventional methods inadvertently lead to this tragedy?
It's such a complex situation.
It is.
On the one hand, Grace was in a dangerous situation and she needed to get out.
Right.
But on the other hand, taking a life is never the answer. And I can't help but wonder if Jimmy will feel responsible for what happened.
I think he will. He's already carrying so much guilt, and this is just going to add to it, and it's going to complicate his relationship with Alice even further.
Totally.
How can he tell her to make good choices to be responsible when he's made so many mistakes himself?
Season 2 is going to be a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how they address all these loose ends and explore the fallout from Grace's actions.
Me neither. And I'm also curious to see how the relationships between the characters continue to evolve.
For sure.
Will Jimmy and Gabby's relationship survive?
Right.
Will Alice ever forgive her father?
Yeah.
Will Paul find peace with his past?
So many questions, and I guess that's the sign of a great show.
It is.
It leaves you wanting more. It stays with you long after the credits roll, and it sparks these conversations and debates about life, love, loss, and everything in between.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Shrinking. It's been a really fun conversation.
It has, and thanks to everyone listening. We appreciate you tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again for more deep dives into your favorite shows and movies.